Yo, yo, what up, my Berserks? So OBS won't capture the game for some reason. I have to have it capture my window, so you got to see Ione for a second. So I want to do a combat tutorial like I've been doing. I will do specific weapon tutorials eventually, but first I just want to go over the basics. There are a lot of, it's not very like complex. So when I am doing combat tutorials for things like Ninja Gaiden, Rise of the Ronin, there's a lot of things the developers aren't telling you. This game, the first Beserk Khazan, does a really good job of telling the player everything. That kind of does hold back the depth of combat in a way, but I mean, the combat's still, phenomenal. So the first thing I want to talk about is how the progression system differs from Souls-like games. It is much more similar to Neo. So we're going to take a look at my weapon here. Right now I'm in New Game Plus. I have an epic set, level 164. So we look at my spear here. I have 685 attack damage, 45 points from the willpower scaling, and 90 points from the proficiency scaling, within a total attack of 820. Now, I also, if I go to my status, I have an attack damage of 1162. So there's, that's almost 40% of my total attack when you look at the status page that is coming from different affixes and multipliers and modifiers and things like that that aren't actually showing in the that aren't on my actual weapon. I want to see, I didn't check this, damage increase, max stamina. I want to see one of these. Okay, an attack damage increase there. Okay. So when it comes to leveling in this game, I see a lot of people treating it like a Souls game where they're, I'm going to do a strength build and they pump strength up or they pump proficiency up depending on the weapon they are using. However, in the first Beserk Khazan, that's not the most efficient way to go about it. So if I interact with the Blade Nexus, and we go to my stats. So right now I have C scaling and willpower, B scaling and proficiency, no scaling and strength. So if I put points in proficiency, I'm getting a total of 3 damage, willpower 2 damage, strength 1 damage. So that means you're not getting anything from scaling really compared to what you'd be getting from spreading your stats around. And I'm going to show why it's important to spread your stats around. So hypothetically here, if I were to, let's say I had 25 less in each of these stats and I had an extra 50 points in proficiency, that would be an extra damage of 1.5 per level. Just to make sure that math makes sense. 3, 2, 1. Well, if I had my points all into proficiency versus split between here, 2 plus 1 divided by 2 is 1.5. So if I had 50 points in here instead of in here, I would have an average of 1.5 more damage per point spent. Okay, which would be roughly 75 extra damage. Well, when I look at my attack damage, I'm at 1162. So an extra 75 damage really isn't doing a lot for me at that point, right? You're not getting a lot from your scaling. If my proficiency was maxed, I would have an extra 75 damage. That doesn't really help you all that much in the grand scheme of things, especially when you look at the fact that you can roll a 71 attack damage onto your weapon anyways, and basically just, negate the scaling. Scaling is low. The majority, again, when we look at like my scaling damage, my total scaling damage right now is 135. That's not a lot, right? My attack damage is 685 and I'm getting 135 from scaling, and I would be getting roughly like 200 from scaling. But there's also different modifiers and affixes and things like that that further increase your attack damage. Now, I'm not saying you need to go sorry, I just went for a run. I'm not saying my allergies. I'm not saying you need to go as hard into the stat splitting as I am here, but let's take a look at what you get. So proficiency, you're getting stamina damage increase, dodge stamina cost decrease, willpower, you're getting stamina recovery, and guard stamina damage decrease. Strength, the biggest thing you're getting is weight. So even if you're a spear user, the set I'm using right now is light, but there are multiple spear sets where even at 49 strength and 40 vitality, I don't have enough agility or enough weight to stay at a agility. One of the hardest points of this game, like easily, is stamina management. Once you get, to end game, that's a little bit easier. But I also see a lot of people pumping endurance, super, super high. However, if you have, better stamina recovery, you're taking less stamina when you guard, you're taking less stamina damage, you're doing more stamina damage. An extra 23% stamina damage is pretty damn big and very useful when you're talking about breaking your opponent's guards, right? So you don't want to just pump your damage stat. And the game is like, it works just like Neo. If you go into a Neo like subreddit or Discord server and you're like, hi, I'm new to Neo, I'm a Souls-like fan, I want to do a strength build, people are going to tell you, no, you don't want to do a strength build. You want to give yourself a good base and spread your stats evenly. Now, if you only want to use one weapon, once you have a good base, I would say like 30 to 35 vit, 30 to 35 endurance, and at least like 25 in every other stat. If you're only using the greatsword, then you can start pumping strength more than I have here, but you want to kind of use your stats for what you need. Is your armor too heavy? You want to be at A agility. The stamina recovery difference between A and B agility is insane. A agility is very, 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 very crucial in my opinion in this game. But you feel if your armor's too heavy, pump your strength. If you need more stamina recovery or stamina management, that's when you can start looking into these two, which help your dodging and guarding stamina costs, as well as stamina damage increase and things like that. So, again, you don't need to go as hard as I do into like a pretty much even stat spread. That's what the game expects from you, I promise. That if it was A scaling on weapons, that would be a different story. Because if I was getting like 5 or 6 points per weapon or per point instead of 3 2 and 1, if it was like 5 2 and 1, then it would be a different story. But we're talking about, and I don't even have the proper, I haven't even changed my fixes on this yet, so I can easily change the guard stamina damage decrease to a flat attack boost and get that extra 75 damage from scaling damage increase, which even further reduces the need for scale. So yeah, I just want to get that out of the way. Most people are leveling up pretty terribly in this game, where they're just pumping one stat, and I promise you that's not the most optimal way to go about it. I know the certified self-proclaimed Souls vets, they know how to play Souls games, and that's what you do in a Souls game, and I agree, that's what you do in a Souls game, but this isn't a Souls game. It's much more reminiscent of Neo and other action RPGs, and they're calling it specifically for a reason, a hardcore action RPG. So now I want to look at, I'm going to do weapon specific tutorials, and again, there's not a lot that is kind of hidden in this game in terms of hidden mechanics, at least not that I've found yet. I'm only like halfway through New Game Plus, so maybe there's things in tech we'll find. But basically, for just the simple mechanics, you have light attacks, you have heavy attacks, you have light heavy combos, you have heavy light combos, you have heavy combos, you have light combos, right? And then you have your spirit skills, which I apparently can't use any right now. You have your spirit skills, which are like, your unique attacks. Using spirit skills kind of sucks early in the game. Once you get further into the game, you get a lot of good, especially New Game Plus, you can really keep your spirit up really well. Early game, it kind of sucks. Now, for defense, you know, you can block, you have a perfect block, you have a dodge, you have a perfect dodge. You obviously want to be brink guarding and brink dodging as much as possible. I also see a lot of people either like doing, oh, I want to play it like Sekiro. You don't want to play this like Sekiro. You don't want to play it like Dark Souls. Some attacks you're going to want to block. You know, perfect block. When I say block, just assume I mean perfect block. When I say dodge, assume I mean perfect dodge. Some attacks you're going to want to block. Some you're going to want to dodge. Voldy, I don't remember his full name, but Voldy, the deer, he's the first boss that really teaches you this because he does his right hand slam with no status effect. His left hand slam has a status effect. I had like half health once and I was trying to save my heal until I had a little bit less health and I died and I didn't miss a single brink guard and I was like, what the hell's happening here? So what the game is trying to tell you, what the devs are trying to tell you is some attacks you need to dodge. And I love that combo because it really teaches you this concept. So his right hand slam, you block. Left hand slam, you dodge. Right hand slam, you block. Left hand slam, you dodge. Right hand slam, you block. And it really, I just kind of cements that. Other bosses later in the game also have a lot of like, I'm so bad with names. Taka, Tokra, whatever, the mermaid waifu, the death chick waifu. Pretty much all waifus have this. There are plague attacks. There's all sorts of shit in this game where you're going to want to be dodging and you're going to want to be blocking. Even just some bosses in general, their combos are going to be very weird to perfectly deflect, and sometimes it's going to be better to be dodging around a little bit. Also, some weapons have a good neutral attack. Some you're going to want to always kind of do a counter attack into the like a dodge attack, especially the greatsword. We'll go over that briefly. I'll briefly touch on the different weapons, but I kind of want to wait to do like full weapon tutorials. So the other thing we have, and I don't even think I have it unlocked right now, I think I took it off because I just really don't use it that much, is reflection. So reflection is an actual parry, okay? Reflection is very powerful. It leaves you very big openings and kind of like stuns the enemies for a second. However, the window is very tight. The timing is different for every weapon. It needs to be hard. I see a lot of people complaining about it, like, God, reflection is so dumb. Like, well, yeah, it has to be harder to pull off, otherwise it would just trivialize the game. So basically, when you want the attack to land is when you're in the upward part of the animation. So we see with the spear here, he does this twirl. And I would say during the upward part of the animation, it's the first like 10 to 40 to 50% of the upward swing. So it's just a few frames where you want it to connect. If he hits you and even if you're in the upward swing, but it's like past that 50% mark, it's not going to work. If you're too early, it's not going to work. And with the spear in particular, it's a really long animation. Other weapons have different reflect timings. So there's a bit of a startup here, but it's not quite as bad. You can be a lot more reactionary with the dual swords. And I think the greatsword has the easiest timing. It's pretty fast. So with the greatsword, you can be a lot more reactionary. And as you go, down the weapon list, it gets harder and harder to pull off. Now, stamina also works differently depending on what you're fighting, and this is identical to Neo. So monster enemies are going to have this purple stamina bar that does not regen. So when you're fighting monster bosses, just like fighting yokai bosses in Neo, you can be a lot more passive, and you can really focus on perfect guarding, getting your counters, perfect guarding, getting your counters, getting your combos when you can, and you can play it a lot safer. However, when you're fighting human enemies, they have the same stamina system you do. So it can regen, and pretty much all of them has some sort of ability that basically allows them to regen their stamina whether or not you're hitting them. Like, you and most of the time these enemies, when they're getting hit or when you're getting hit, your stamina's not going to regenerate. However, they have, kind of cheats around this. So when you're fighting human bosses, you really need to keep the aggression on and not give them a lot of room to breathe. I really don't like the great sword for human bosses for this reason. It's just so hard to like keep up pressure. Stamina management's a lot harder, and a lot of times they're so close to being posture broken, but I'm also close to being posture broken, and I have to let my stamina regen, and by that time they're able to regen. So, I much prefer the spear or dual wield for humans. It's just a little bit easier. However, long story short, TLDR, make sure you're keeping up aggression. That's where also with humans too, I do a lot of dodging and kind of getting like counterattacks in and just trying to keep up the pressure. Now, when we look at the different weapons, they all have kind of different play styles. We'll start with the dual wield. Dual wield is your dodge focused playstyle more than anything. That doesn't mean if you play dual wield, you don't deflect, but if you have a hard time perfect dodging or you just like that kind of zip around playstyle, dual wield is great. There are skills that allow you, there's this, I don't have them spec'd right now, I'll go over this in the weapon tutorial, where you can like dash back and this attack will shoot a projectile, and then you have a dash back, you can get back in, kind of like using the hatchets in Neo is what it reminds me of. In, out, and like all around them you have attacks that give you dodging iframes. You're very mobile, you're very, flashy and fluid. Great sword works best with a kind of like a block counter type of play style. Every skill, every weapon has this skill where after a normal guard, or I think it's normally a brink guard, I don't think all of them have a normal guard, but after a brink guard, you can do a counter attack. First of all, pick that up on every weapon. A lot of bosses are going to have combos where you're like brink guard, wait, brink guard, wait, and if you have the skill, you're able to get damage and do posture damage during their combo. So brink guard, counter, brink guard, counter, brink guard, counter, and then during the last brink guard, when they, when you kind of do, when there's the final hit of the attack and they kind of get stunned, that's when you can kind of combo on them. But that is a very, very crucial skill in my opinion. But greatsword is going to basically excel in these counter attack types of skills. It's just super, super powerful. You also have skills like Ghost Arm. Where's Ghost Arm? Ghost Arm block, where you're also going to be doing a lot of charging attacks with the greatsword, and it's the only weapon that lets you cancel out of your charge attack to block, which is incredibly useful again. So that, and then there's also Counter Strike, which is one of the best skills in the game. It's basically the same timing as a perfect block. However, you deal some damage to them, and it knocks them back, it stuns them. So you can see a lot of this is built around charge attacks, kind of there's poise trading attacks, and you get extra hyper armor, stuff like that. Spear is kind of a middle ground. If you like to dodge, you like to deflect, you like to kind of do it all, spear is really good for kind of that just kind of like all around middle ground type of a weapon. Spear is really heavily dependent on moonlight stance, which you get this phantom, kind of like how the dual wield has it, where it deals extra damage, it stun locks enemies, it has really good brink guard passives, it has really good dodging passives. The fastest and best, let's see if I can find it here, full moon, this is the fastest and easily the best charged attack in the game. So they're kind of you're going to be leading into this a lot. A couple of tips with the spear: getting into moonlight stance can get you in trouble because you always want to be in moonlight stance. So there's a lot of times where you're going to want to it's the third hit of the combo that gets you into it. There are a couple ways around that. If you dash back, the follow-up attack puts you in moonlight stance. This skill, the follow-up puts you in moonlight stance. In fact, I don't know if I honestly don't know this. No, they don't. I didn't think so. I didn't think every skill every follow-up from a spirit attack or fury attack puts you in moonlight stance. This where is it? Trance Liberation is busted. This honestly needs a nerf. It puts you in Moonlight Stance on the follow-up, and you can just chain Moonlight Stance, proccing light attacks from Trance Liberation once you unlock it. I shit all over Ozma. I felt kind of bad that I just kind of like cheesed him with doing this. But it's easily the strongest setup in the game. The last thing to really go over in the commons tree are going to be counterattacks. These are like burst counters in Neo. Basically the same timing as a perfect block, not the same timing as reflection. I do recommend getting your spirit or fury skills basically as soon as possible. You want to, the brutal attack healing you want to get as soon as possible. The only like cool kind of like hidden thing I have found, the first part's pretty known. If you block while you're dodging and you get hit, you will actually block. So when you're dodging, hold block, because if you get hit, you will actually block it. If you time this properly, you can actually brink guard while dodging. I do it a lot against Malika, whatever the hell his name is, because I have when he's doing his EI quick draw shit, I have a hard time just straight up brink blocking it. So I time my dodge and try to get the brink block while dodging. That way, if I miss the timing, it's just a brink guard or a brink dodge, right? I don't do any damage to him, he doesn't do any damage to me, but if I time it right, even though I'm dodging, I can still get the brink guard. The timing is very tight, a lot tighter than like a regular brink block, but that's kind of the only like hidden tech or hidden mechanic that I've found so far. I think that kind of covers like the basics of the game. There's not a lot of hidden stuff. It's just really a get good game. You do low damage, bosses have high health, you don't have a lot of heals. I do think it's the hardest game, and I play Ninja Gaiden, I'm Master Ninja. I play Souls games at level 1. I played Neo Depths. And I really do think this was the hardest, at least initial run. You need the perfect bosses. You don't have any wiggle room to kind of just stumble your way through. You don't have RPG mechanics like, Neo or Souls games where you can just kind of cheese the game through over leveling or using things like sloth or confusion. There's none of that shit. There's just none of it. When you're going through the base game, another thing to like go with like the stat spread, you're not going to get the weapon you want all the time. You're going to beat a boss and they're going to drop a really good weapon with like 2 or 3 pieces of a set for a different weapon, right? For the spear, for the greatsword. And they expect you to be kind of trying things out. They don't expect you to respec your stats with a consumable item each time you like don't get the drop you want. That's another reason why I promise you the game wants you to kind of spread your stats out. Versus, strength build. Oh, I'm a Souls Fed strength build. That's not what you want to do. I don't give a shit what Fighting Cowboy and people like that say. That's not the optimal way to play this game. So equip what the highest level is, essentially, right? Don't spend a lot of time really trying to like re-roll the stats. It's not worth it on your initial run to be re-rolling the stats like that. It costs a lot of lacrima. If you find a set you really like, you can soul match or augment it. That does get pretty pricey, but again, if that's what you want to do, do it. I just really recommend building a base of stats up to like 25 to 30 before you really start trying to specialize. And in fact, there's level caps. I expect that aspect of the game will change similar to Neo. So there's a cap at New Game Plus 2. I will bet money, if anyone wants to bet money, that in New Game Plus 3, when DLC comes out, will give us a new difficulty. That new difficulty will have new sets. It will also increase the level and stat caps that we have. That will most likely come with the ability to get either affixes or set bonuses that increase the scaling level of your weapons, or it'll be like a it'll either be an affix that you see on a weapon or a set bonus. Something will give increased scaling at that point, because they don't expect you to push every stat to 100, every stat to 150. At that point, it'll make more sense to specialize once they increase the scaling through whatever, like a fix or set bonus, or however they decide to approach it. But I promise you that's what will happen, and that's when it'll be time to kind of specialize, just like Neo. Your first couple runs, you're not really specializing in anything. You're building a good base. Then once you hit Dream of the Demon, Dream of the Wise, Dream of the Neo, you start trying to push for your ultimate stats and pushing stats to 150 and changing the scaling of your weapons and all that shit. So I promise you that's the way the game is meant to be, and it will change, and scaling will be more prominent in the future. But yeah, thanks for joining. Check out my weapon guides when I drop them. Peace.